At the will reading, my mother handed my sister $30 million like it was a simple courtesy. I received nothing. No envelope. No check. Not even a glance. She looked straight at me and said, "This is final." The room went quiet, the kind of silence that feels planned, rehearsed, like everyone had already agreed I didn't belong in the story. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I stayed silent. Because when you grow up being overlooked, you learn that silence can make people careless. My sister smiled across the table, already counting money that wasn't even in her account yet. My father avoided my eyes. My mother folded her hands, calm and satisfied, as if she had just closed a chapter. Then the lawyer stood up. He didn't look at my sister. He didn't look at the money. He looked at my mother and said there was one sealed document my grandfather ordered him to read only if I was present. That was the moment everything changed. My name is Hannah Miller, and I was 31 years old when my family decided, in a single room, that I was worth nothing on paper. The conference room was cold in that quiet, professional way lawyers seem to prefer. A long wooden table, bottled water, no one touched. A city skyline framed neatly through the window, as if reminding us that life outside this room would go on no matter what happened inside it. My sister Emily sat across from me, perfectly relaxed, legs crossed, her phone face down on the table like she didn't need it anymore. My mother, Linda, sat beside her, back straight, chin lifted, wearing the same composed smile she used at charity events. My father, Richard, chose the seat farthest from me. The lawyer, Michael Brooks, cleared his throat. "We'll begin with the primary distributions," he said, opening a thick folder. Before he could continue, my mother leaned forward. "There's no need to drag this out," she said smoothly. "My daughter Emily will be receiving $30 million from my father's estate." Emily let out a small, controlled breath, pretending she was surprised. The room filled with murmured congratulations, soft laughter, the sound of a happy ending being rehearsed. Then Michael paused. "And Hannah," he began. "She gets nothing," my mother interrupted, turning to me. "Your grandfather made his wishes very clear. You chose your own path. This is final." Her words landed calmly, precisely like they'd been practiced. I felt my pulse slow instead of spike. No shock, no disbelief, just recognition. This was the moment everything I'd lived through finally had a number attached to it. 0. Emily glanced at me, a quick look that was half pity, half victory. My father stared at the table, as if the wood grain suddenly required his full attention. Michael hesitated. Just for a second. I noticed it because my mother did too. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Michael closed the folder. "There may be," he said quietly. And for the first time that morning, my mother's smile slipped. For a few seconds after Michael spoke, no one moved. It was the kind of pause that stretches longer than it should, heavy and uncomfortable, like the air itself was waiting for permission to circulate again. My mother was the first to recover. "There is no problem," she said. Her tone clipped, professional, the voice she used when she wanted a conversation to end on her terms. "We have already handled everything that matters. Let's not turn this into a performance." She turned toward me slowly, deliberately, as if offering me one last chance to embarrass myself. "Well?" she asked. "Do you have something to say, Hannah?" All eyes shifted to me. This was the moment they expected tears, or anger, or a shaky speech about fairness and family. My mother had always believed emotions were weaknesses you could use against someone if you waited long enough. I gave her none of it. "I'm here to listen," I said quietly. "That's all." Emily frowned. "You're being dramatic," she said, forcing a small laugh. "This is already uncomfortable. Just say whatever you're going to say." "I don't need to," I replied. That was when I noticed it, the subtle change in the room. My father stopped tapping his fingers. Emily shifted in her chair, her knee bouncing once before she stilled it. My mother's eyes narrowed, just a fraction. Silence made them nervous. Michael cleared his throat again, but this time he didn't open the folder in front of him. Instead, he closed it carefully, as if setting something aside. "Mrs. Miller," he said, looking directly at my mother, Your father left instructions that supersede the documents you're referencing. Linda's smile hardened. My father was old, she said. He signed papers he didn't fully understand. That happens. Michael nodded once, acknowledging the statement without agreeing. Which is why these instructions were documented, reviewed, and sealed under legal supervision. It means to dated not paired, in that it not paired for things. He bent down and opened his briefcase. The sound of the zipper felt unnaturally loud. When he placed the envelope on the table, it wasn't dramatic. No flourish. Just a thick, cream-colored package, sealed and labeled in neat, familiar handwriting. I recognized it instantly. My grandfather's. Emily leaned forward. Why have we never seen that before? Because, Michael said evenly, you were never meant to. My mother pushed back her chair and stood up. This is inappropriate, she said sharply. There is no second document. If there were, I would know about it. Michael didn't look at her. This document, he continued, was sealed at your father's request. It was to be opened only if all immediate family members were present. He paused, and only if Hannah was in the room. The color drained from my mother's face. For the first time since I'd walked in, she looked uncertain, not angry, not offended, but caught off guard. I stayed silent, and that silence, I realized, was doing more damage than any argument ever could. My mother took a step toward the table, palms pressed flat against the wood as if she could physically stop what was about to happen. This is unnecessary, she said, her voice rising just enough to betray the calm she was trying to project. My father trusted me. Whatever that is, it's outdated, irrelevant, or misunderstood. Michael didn't respond right away. He picked up the envelope slowly, giving everyone a clear look at the seal, the signature, the date written in my grandfather's careful handwriting. It's neither outdated nor misunderstood, he said. It was prepared less than 8 months before his passing, reviewed by independent counsel, and signed with medical clearance. Emily shook her head. That doesn't make sense, she muttered. Grandpa barely talked business anymore. I felt something tighten in my chest, not anger, but clarity. He talked business with me. He just didn't do it where they could hear. Michael broke the seal. The sound was soft, almost polite, but it landed like a crack of thunder in the room. To my granddaughter, Hannah Miller, he read. I leave full controlling interest in North Shore Capital Group, including all subsidiaries, accounts, and assets held solely in my name. My sister's breath hitched. What is that? She asked, too quickly. Michael looked up. A private investment firm your grandfather built, quietly over the last decade. My father finally spoke. That's impossible, he said. Dad didn't have time for something like that. He made time, Michael replied, and he made sure it was separate from family accounts. The words kept coming. This firm currently oversees logistics software investments, regional distribution contracts, and real estate holdings. Its valuation exceeds the amount distributed today. Silence slammed down hard. $30 million suddenly sounded small. My mother laughed once, sharp and hollow. You expect us to believe Hannah owns more than all of us combined? Michael met her eyes. Ownership isn't a belief, Mrs. Miller. It's a fact. She stepped back like the floor had shifted under her feet. He was manipulated, she said, louder now. She turned him against us. Has not sewed? Michael lowered his gaze to the page again. He anticipated that accusation, he said. Which is why he explained exactly why he made this decision. I swallowed as he continued. I am aware, he read, that Hannah has been kept at a distance from me. Visits canceled. Messages unanswered. Information filtered. I have been told she doesn't care. I know this is not true. My mother's composure shattered. That's a lie, she shouted. I protected him. Michael didn't look up. I have also discovered transfers from joint accounts used without my consent, he read. When I asked questions, I was told I had already approved them. Emily stood abruptly. This is insane. You're destroying our family. I finally lifted my head. No, I said quietly. You did that long before today. Michael folded the document carefully. There is more, he said. including evidence your father insisted be presented if this decision was challenged. My mother's voice broke into something raw and unrecognizable. What evidence? Michael reached into his briefcase again and placed a small black drive on the table. A recorded statement, he said, in his own words. That was the moment my mother stopped arguing and started to panic. No one tried to stop Michael when he reached for the small black drive. My mother had been shouting only seconds earlier, but now she stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, as if the words had finally abandoned her. "You're not playing that," she said, her voice thin, strained. "You can't just ambush us with some recording." Michael looked at her calmly. "Your father requested that this be shown if his decisions were questioned. On the ready market." My father shifted in his chair. "This is unnecessary," he muttered. "Dad had good days and bad days. Everyone knows that." Michael didn't argue. He simply turned to the assistant seated at the end of the table. A laptop appeared. The drive was plugged in. The screen flickered to life. My grandfather filled the frame. He looked older than I remembered, thinner, but his eyes were clear-focused in a way I hadn't seen in years. He sat upright, hands folded, wearing a pressed shirt like he was attending a meeting, not recording his final words. "My name is Robert Miller," he said evenly, "and I am here to explain why I changed my will." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "I am not confused," he continued. "I am not being pressured. I know exactly what I am doing." My father let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. "This is unbelievable." On the screen, my grandfather leaned forward slightly. "I have watched money leave my accounts without my approval," he said. "When I asked about it, I was told I had already agreed. I had not." Emily's face drained of color. "I have also watched my relationship with Hannah be managed for me," he went on. "Calls redirected, messages unanswered, visits canceled under the excuse of protecting my health." My chest tightened. Every memory rose at once, the ignored texts, the holidays I was told not to come, the silence that never made sense until now. My mother slammed her hand on the table. "Turn this off," she shouted. He was upset. He didn't understand what he was saying. Michael didn't move. On the screen, my grandfather's voice hardened. "I understand more than they think," he said. "And I understand who listens." He paused, then softened. "Hannah listens. She asks questions. She builds instead of taking. She never once treated me like an inconvenience." I felt my eyes burn, but I didn't look away. "That is why North Shore Capital Group belongs to her," he said. "Every share, every account." The room was silent, except for the low hum of the laptop. My mother's composure finally cracked. "This is not fair," she screamed. "After everything we did for him." My grandfather's face filled the screen one last time. "If you are watching this," he said, "it means you are trying to take what does not belong to you." The video ended. No one spoke. And for the first time in my life, the truth didn't whisper. It stood up and demanded to be heard. The screen went dark, but the silence didn't lift. It pressed down on the room, heavy and final. My mother was breathing fast now, short, shallow breaths like she was trying to outrun what had already caught her. My father stared at the blank laptop, his fingers tapping against the table in a rhythm that didn't make sense anymore. "This doesn't prove anything," he said at last, though his voice lacked conviction. "People say things when they're emotional." Michael closed the laptop gently, as if giving my grandfather the dignity of a proper goodbye. "The recording is dated, time-stamped, and accompanied by a medical evaluation confirming full capacity," he said. "But that isn't all." My mother snapped her head up. "Of course it isn't," she said bitterly. "You wouldn't stop at humiliating us." "This isn't about humiliation," Michael replied. "It's about documentation." He slid a thin stack of papers across the table. "Bank statements, transfer records, authorization logs. I petitioned the court for a forensic review of the joint accounts after your father raised concerns," Michael continued. "These documents show repeated transfers made under power of attorney for expenses unrelated to his care." Emily leaned forward, clutching the edge of the table. "That money paid for family things." Michael didn't look at her. Luxury travel, vehicle leases, personal branding expenses. My mother's voice rose again. We took care of him. We sacrificed. And the court will consider that, Michael said evenly. But it will also consider timing, frequency, and consent. He turned to me for the first time since the video ended. Hannah, your grandfather anticipated a challenge. He authorized me to file the sealed document immediately if his intent was questioned. My heart thudded. What happens now? I asked. Michael's answer was calm, professional, and devastating. The court will recognize your controlling interest in North Shore Capital Group. If the will is contested, these records become public. Emily's grip tightened. Public? Michael nodded. Yes, including the transfers, the recording, and the medical evaluations. My mother sank back into her chair as if her legs had finally given out. For the first time, she wasn't arguing. She wasn't commanding. She was calculating. And I realized then that this wasn't about love or betrayal anymore. It was about evidence. And evidence doesn't care who raised you. It only cares about what can be proven. They didn't contest the will. Not officially. Not publicly. Michael filed the sealed document the following week, along with the recording, the medical clearance, and the preliminary financial review. Once the paperwork moved out of that conference room and into the court system, the confidence my parents had lived on for decades began to evaporate. What followed wasn't dramatic. There were no shouting matches, no final confrontations, just consequences. A forensic accountant was appointed to complete the audit my grandfather had requested before he died. Line by line, year by year, the story my parents had controlled so carefully was translated into numbers that didn't lie. Expenses justified as family needs. Transfers labeled as temporary. Authorizations claimed but never documented. The truth didn't explode. It accumulated. Emily stopped posting online almost overnight. The trips disappeared first, then the partnerships. Brands that had once called her daily went quiet, then distant, then unreachable. Her carefully curated life didn't collapse in a single moment, it simply stopped being funded. My parents sold the house within 3 months. The one with the perfect lawn and the holiday photos staged on the front steps. The one my mother liked to call our legacy. They downsized quietly, far from the city where people had started to ask uncomfortable questions. They didn't call me. Not to apologize. Not to explain. Not even to argue. And for the first time, their silence wasn't something done to me. It was something I chose to accept. I signed the final documents alone, no family witnesses. Just Michael, a clerk, and the steady weight of a pen in my hand. When I finished, Michael nodded once. They have no legal claim to your assets, he said. Not now. Not ever. I felt something loosen in my chest, not relief exactly, but clarity. I wasn't walking away from my family. I was walking forward without them. I moved west 2 months later. Not to disappear, and not to start over from nothing, but to start over on my own terms. Seattle felt right. Far enough to breathe, close enough to work. North Shore Capital Group already had a small office there, a handful of people who had been quietly doing real work long before my family ever knew the company existed. The first week, no one treated me like an inheritance. They treated me like a responsibility. There were spreadsheets to review, contracts to understand, partners who wanted to know whether I was serious or just another name on a document. I welcomed that. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being evaluated on how well I fit a family image, but on whether I paid attention, asked the right questions, and followed through. And I did. We didn't chase flash. We focused on stability, helping mid-sized logistics companies streamline operations, helping regional distributors survive markets that didn't forgive mistakes. I remembered my grandfather's voice every time we made a decision. Build something useful, something that lasts. I set up a small scholarship fund in his name, quietly, without announcements or press releases. Just opportunities for students who reminded me a little too much of myself, curious, overlooked, and underestimated. Emily emailed me once during that first year. No accusations, no demands, just a few paragraphs admitting she didn't know who she was without the attention, without the money smoothing everything over. I didn't answer right away. When I finally did, I kept it simple. Kind but firm. We weren't enemies, but we weren't close either. Not yet. As for my parents, they faded into distance and rumor. A different state. A smaller life. No more control. And strangely, that was enough. Because the life I was building no longer required their permission to exist. For a long time, I thought the hardest part of my life was being ignored. Growing up as the daughter who didn't fit the picture, the one who didn't perform well on cue or reflect the image my parents wanted to present, I believed that if I just worked harder, stayed quieter, or proved myself more clearly, they would eventually see me. I was wrong. Some people don't overlook you because you lack value. They overlook you because acknowledging your value would threaten the story they've built about themselves. What my grandfather gave me wasn't just a company or financial security. He gave me perspective. He showed me that being quiet doesn't mean being powerless, and that patience can be a form of strength when it's paired with preparation. I learned that family isn't defined by who controls the table when decisions are made. It's defined by who protects your future when you're not in the room. I also learned something harder. You don't have to stay in spaces where your worth is constantly debated. You're allowed to leave. You're allowed to build something new with people who don't need to be convinced you matter. If you've ever been the person who was dismissed, underestimated, or quietly written out, remember this. Your value doesn't disappear just because someone refuses to acknowledge it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to speak louder. It's to step forward, calm, prepared, and unafraid when the truth finally has room to stand.